Hello, we are the authors of the book, The Practice of Letting Go. I'm William Frank Diedrich, and you guys,
Lamaro.
John Bailey.
all right. So we are here to do I think this is our sixth podcast, and we're going to talk about letting go of our attachment to a point of view, to our emotional response regarding events happening in the world, if I could summarize that. And so, where do you want to start?
Well, I want to start by saying that that's a really good summation because we're not letting go of the world events, we're letting go of our emotional response to those events. And that's often in the form of an attachment. And so I think that the first thing I do, I can only speak for myself, is it's hard to watch the news, it's hard to listen to what's happening without having an emotional response. And I think I'm pretty good at controlling my emotional responses.
Yeah.
But then things seem to be so extreme and the division seems to be so large, it's hard not to feel, right, whatever it is, empathy for the victims, anger against the villains, right? And so the first thing I do for me is recognize that whatever it is I'm feeling, is it helping to solve a problem? That's where I begin. Right? Is my anger, is my sadness, is my anxiety, is my hopelessness, my despair, whatever it is I'm feeling, I always try to move from what I like to call the problem consciousness to a solution consciousness and take that energy and channel it in a more productive way, which to me is about, even if the three of us say, hey, let's go have lunch and let's all talk about what we think we might be able to influence in the way of solutions to these problems.
All right,
Yes,
good.
I
Yeah.
guess I'm the ostrich here because I actually had to sit down with my wife and say, "Can you tell me some of the latest news events?"
You're smart.
About 5 years ago, I stopped watching or listening to any news, um, which was odd for me because I used to feel like I needed to stay abreast of everything that was going on. And in my previous life and job, I was always watching like C-SPAN and governmental information sources because I was so involved in regulatory issues and what have you, legislation, whether I would support or not. Um, and I reached a point, and I don't know if it was one of the presidential campaigns, something around that. I don't remember exactly, but I said, you know what, I'm done with this. I changed my focus completely on the spiritual. Anything that comes into me is evaluated in that context. And um, there has always been evil in the world, there's always been good. And there's a tendency to want to throw the baby out with the wash water. Um, and I don't want to do that. And so I feel very convicted that I'm called to love. I don't have to like, I don't have to condone, but I still love. And that keeps me in a position where I can talk to all people and not be overly controlled by something emotional. The most I get keyed up on is local property taxes. If I stay
Wow,
away
that's
from it, I don't get angry.
yeah. I'm not sure we have any more influence over our local property taxes than we do
No.
over global problems. But I think, John, however you get there, I think what you said that really resonates with me is this idea that I can talk to anyone. I think that's the key. Not scream at anyone, right? But to talk, and I think healthy dialogue is just a lost art.
It is.
Yeah.
There's these, uh, I think one of the greatest evils that ever came about is social media because people will say whatever and feel there's no uh, opportunity for anyone to reciprocate, that I can just puke it out there and everybody will just have to deal with it.
Mhm.
And it really, saddens me how we have become such a fragmented country in all these issues. And this is from just listening. I think I mentioned to you, I sit in a coffee shop and I can overhear conversations. I hear it in faith gatherings, people debating issues. There's no place where the conversation, it's not really a conversation, it's always a debate, it seems, being held, and everyone's willing to sacrifice relationship to achieve the communication of their point of view. And if it hurts you, offends you, that's just uh, tangent to the whole thing. It's not the issue for me. But where I look at it is in the spiritual sense. And I look, you guys know my faith, and Jesus was a master teacher, and he could talk in the third chapter of John to Nicodemus, and turn around and talk to the woman at the well in the fourth chapter. And my thought is always, can I meet somebody where they're at? Instead of trying to drag them or push them in my direction, simply meet them where they're at. And if I can do that, then I have opened a door, an opportunity for a conversation. And I believe that's what I should be doing, not just, like I say, spewing whatever's on my mind.
Yeah.
That's
So
true.
listening to that, John, and you guys have heard me say this before, it always makes me think of how politics comes into play, right? So many of the problems that are amplified in the media are politically charged, and so that adds a whole dimension to it. And we talked about healthy dialogue. One of my favorite books on dialogue is called Crucial Conversations. You've heard me guys talk about this. And I remember reading a story in that book where the authors, there were four of them, facilitated a workshop. I think it was in New York, I'm not sure, but major city. And it was scheduled for 2 days. And they invited pro-choice and pro-life groups from that local area to come together. And they taught them their system of healthy dialogue on day one. And I think it was a pretty full day. And then the challenge for them was to come back on the next day and to work together utilizing these tools that they'd been taught the day before to come to a common solution, something that they would be willing to work together on relative to this issue. And it took them less than 20 minutes to come up with an obvious solution when you hear it. But I couldn't have guessed this. But it took them less than 20 minutes to agree that they could work together on helping to prevent unwanted teenage pregnancies.
That's great.
That kind of dialogue, there are efforts, there are some media outlets that are really trying to bring together representatives of opposing points of view and try to not even facilitate, really shine a light on the fact that there are politicians, for example, that are working together across the aisle to introduce legislation to solve problems. So it's not like it's not happening, but media doesn't shine a light on that because that doesn't sell.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
politicians typically don't shine a light on that because they're running for reelection and they have to pander to their constituents. And a lot of their
Right.
constituents are drafted in these districts that are pretty attached to the same points of view, right? It's either a blue district or a red district, right? And in reality, the politicians that are working together are typically from purple districts or purple states. So they're
Mm,
incentivized by their own political ambitions to come together.
sure.
But that is I think what we're all feeling, this frustration of the inability to talk to people with an opposing point of view without losing our temper, without losing our minds.
Yeah. In the book you're referring to, Crucial Conversations, the first step is to look at yourself.
Yeah.
I find that my frustration is not that somebody has a different point of view than me. I'm fine with that. Even if I feel strongly, I'm okay with somebody else thinking differently. My frustration is how non-systemically so many people look at things and reduce it down to good guys and bad guys. Simplify whoever's standing next to the problem, it must be their fault. And as opposed to looking at the whole picture and seeing all the different factors that are creating whatever's happening. I see things happening in our cities right now where people are in conflict with each other. And it feels like people in the media and politicians are like the puppet masters, and the people who are fighting each other in the streets are the marionettes. They call them, they're marionettes, right? Yeah. Yeah,
Sounds right.
and that they think that they're acting on their own, but they're actually being manipulated in so many ways. So I always my big work is to let go of my attachment that people should understand uh, how systems work and look at it how I look at it and just meet them as you said where they're at. And I do run into people who see things that way, and we have great conversations. Even though we might each lean in a different direction, we understand that, and just like the three of us do.
Mhm.
And so that's a pleasure. But I realize that I'm not going to influence anybody until I can let go of my own attachment to being right, to
Yeah.
having the answers to whatever.
Yeah. I think the way the authors put it, which is brilliant, and is start with your heart, right? Which that's the emotional side of it, right? I think we have to be honest with ourselves about what we're feeling and the talk track in our heads that are fanning the flames of what we're feeling and try to assume the best in other people instead of automatically assuming the worst. I think it's a great place to start. I think you're right, Bill.
Yeah. And
One
look
of
for
the,
places where you agree.
Hmm.
Find your commonality, just like the example you're referring to of the pro-life, pro-choice people getting together and finding a topic they can agree on.
That's right. And I'm sure that they would disagree about how to achieve the goal, but they were
Sure.
able to agree on the goal. That's a huge start because if you don't have a mutual goal, how are you going to reach common ground?
Right.
Right? It starts with finding a common goal, and they were able to do that. And it was elegant because if there are no unwanted pregnancies, a lot of abortions are unnecessary, right?
Right.
They're not needed. How to achieve that goal again can be problematic.
Right.
one of the things that I see is I kind of picture life in two dimensions in the respect of the horizontal plane, where everybody is in it. They're more inclined to make a statement instead of asking a question. And with the spiritual aspect in life, I know the three of us have this going on. We can we can ascend vertically above the chaos. And when I'm able to look at it from a 10,000-foot view versus a 100-foot view, I can begin to see all the elements that are at play. I can start to see where the issues are originating, where they're directed, where the responses are coming from, and from that, ask intelligent questions. And I like, the greatest teachers I've ever known were the ones that knew how to ask the right questions. And if I can enter into a conversation asking, and usually trying not to appear ignorant, but just maybe at best uninformed, I can ask questions and get their perspective and ask, what gave you that perspective? What brought this fear, or anger, or anxiety upon you from that situation? What is your concern? And what do you do with that concern? Because getting into a debate with me or anyone else is not going to, as you said, Mike, it's not going to alter anything. Is it just being therapeutic for yourself to get it off your chest? Okay, say what you want and I'll listen. But I will come back probably with a question more than a comment. Um, and
Yeah.
I don't think I'm wishy washy. I can maintain a neutrality with knowing what my own opinions are and what I'm convicted of by anything, but I don't have to try to shove that on someone else and force it uh, just so that I think sometime we're going to line up. And one other point from your example there, Mike, with the pro-choice, pro-life, is we always in our society tend to begin at a point of division. I see that in the church all the time, instead of a point of unity. And if I can agree on something with someone, let's work from that point and have the conversation and not start out disunified and starting out in debate.
I agree. It's this idea of debate, right? I think that's a key word. And I can't remember the quote, but I remember reading somewhere, a man forced to change his opinion against his will is still of the same opinion still, or something like that. In
Yeah.
other words, you can use leverage against someone, but you haven't really changed their mind.
Right.
And debate by its own nature has a winner and a loser, right? So we're not trying to change our mind. We're trying to get an audience to agree with our position versus somebody else's position. But when you do the study, the people that were in the audience end up voting for the opinion that they came in with. Right? Nobody's minds were changed, especially the two that were engaged in the debate. And one of my favorite, so I believe in the power question. There's so many books that have been written about that. And my favorite question is, please help me understand. Because the only thing I'm admitting ignorance to is your opinion. I don't fully understand your opinion. And so it doesn't create a defensive stance. I'm just basically acknowledging that you have an opinion that I don't fully understand. And before I judge it, I'm asking for your help and helping me understand. And then even and it's all about follow-up questions that are digging deeper. Most people are just listening without any empathy or desire to understand, right? Seek first to understand before being understood. Very biblical, I believe. And I think it's brilliant. But most people can't wait for the person to stop talking so that they can, like what do you say? One of you said puke out there, right? I mean, that's really what it's like. I want to puke all over your argument so that I can correct your way of thinking if you would just shut up and listen to me.
Yeah.
Because I'm right.
Because I'm right
Of
and you're so
course.
wrong and you don't even know how wrong you are. But
Yeah.
if I'm really acknowledging that we may have a misunderstanding and I sincerely want to understand your point of view, and then I'm not going to puke all over it. I'm going to ask you more questions to help me understand, like you were saying, John. How did you derive that view? Where does that come from? What facts are you relying on to inform you? There's a lot of listening to be done first if you truly want to engage in healthy dialogue and move the focus away from this disagreement towards some creative solution, which
True.
requires compromise, which there's not a lot of people interested in compromise these days.
It also requires a willingness that if I'm conversing with someone and we have different points of view, am I willing to change my mind if I hear something that sounds logical to me? Am I willing to be open enough to let go of my need to be right and change my opinion? And if I'm not willing to change my opinion, if I go in saying, I'm not going to change no matter what they say, then it's not really a conversation.
I
I'm just,
agree.
again, waiting for them to stop talking so that I can say what I've got to say because I want them to change their mind. But we could ask, what if? What if I just listen and understand? What might happen then? Because I already know what will happen if I push my opinion, that
You know,
we'll just be at odds. So what if I do something different and just listen and fully understand the other point of view and ask a lot of questions? What would happen then?
I like that, Bill, a lot.
I do too. Me too.
Jesus himself used to say, let those who have ears, let them hear. And I don't think there was a crowd out there with a lot of people missing ears. I think there were those who were of such a strong position and bias that they couldn't hear his truth, the statements he was making. And so listening is something I see people doing less and less of. And I even practice it in our podcast here. am I sitting here hearing what you're saying, or am I formulating another response? And it's really easy to fall into that. And if I don't listen to you, my response may be completely off or out of line. It may not even correspond correctly to what you just said. So listening, I believe, is absolutely essential to this process.
I coach a lot of leaders, as you know, and one of the best leadership attributes for me is I'm not even sure it's a word, but persuadability, right? To me, everybody kind of understands that, I think, intuitively. But my point is that leadership isn't positional authority, it's influence. And if you want to influence others, you have to show them that you are persuadable, that your ideas are not locked in, that you're willing to acknowledge that they have something valuable to say in whatever decision you're trying to make.
And that's based, I think, in a mutual trust and respect,
Mm-hmm.
which I think are foundational to any relationship. If I trust you and respect you, even if I don't know you well, but I can at least trust you're a fellow citizen, I can respect the fact that you have an opinion and a right to it, then I can open that line of communication. But if I don't trust you and I don't respect you, I've shut you down before you ever showed up.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
Or you never get an invitation to show up.
Yeah, at least the second one for sure.
That's right. That's great.
Okay. I'm looking at events. I do keep up with what's going on, but I don't watch the normal news. I watch a lot of clips and I watch a lot of people that are um, independent. And of course, they have their own points of view. But I find in little clips, I can get an idea of what's going on. One of the big controversies today, of course, is uh, is ICE being in the big cities and rounding up immigrants who have not come here legally. And I'm finding these extremes, and I'm wondering if is there a solution to this? Because one side is saying we're going to come in and we're going to round up all the people who don't belong here. We're going to send them back. And if they're criminals, we're going to make sure they go back. And the other side's saying we want to defund ICE. We don't want them to be around anymore. And it doesn't seem like either side is gaining a lot of love. So, except
It's
with the
fair,
people that already agree with them. So,
but
what do we do in a situation like this?
I don't think it's any more emotionally charged than pro-life or pro-choice. And that's why I
True.
bring that up, right? That's highly charged, politically charged. What it took is these groups coming together with a facilitator. I think that's what's really missing here. Everybody who's in the debate has already taken a side. I think
Yeah.
we need somebody who can truly be objective, somebody who's skilled in healthy dialogue to facilitate representatives from these groups to come together and again start with how do we even have a dialogue when the emotions are running so high. We have to, and I think this is what's starting to happen. We're trying to turn down the temperature. Okay, but who's the adult in the room who's going to bring people together once the temperature's tamped down to have a healthy dialogue around what appears to be at least a philosophical disagreement about immigration and people who are here illegally, right? Leaders, politicians seem to be unable to accomplish any kind of meaningful immigration reform. So we're not dealing with the solution. We just keep pounding on the problem.
Right.
It's going to take someone. I don't know who that someone, that group of people is. Maybe the authors of Crucial Conversations will come up and
Yeah.
offer their services. But I think that's what it's going to take.
Yeah. I'm thinking
This is
if I were part of ICE, what would I do? Well, I would want to come to town a little bit early and talk to the governor and the other leaders and say, hey, we need to come to town. There's been some issues. I'd like to hear what your concerns are about that so that we can address them ahead of time and prevent people getting hurt. So, and then have a conversation about it. That's what I would want to do. I don't think that's happening.
Well, it's starting to. So just recently, I don't remember his name, but the head of DHS or something like that has gone to Minnesota, has met with the governor, and the approach that they're taking is, listen, you have people who are here illegally who have committed crimes in your jails, but you're not voluntarily turning those people over to federal officials so that they can be dealt with at
Mm.
that level. You know, it's all sanctuary city, sanctuary state
Right.
policy, and without casting judgment on whether that's right or wrong, you know, it's a little late, but better late than never. At least I think that's what they're trying to do. Trump
Yeah.
is talking to governors and mayors,
I
people at
did see that.
DHS are. But again, those people all have skin in the game, right?
Yeah,
I don't know, I don't think that they're persuadable, to go back to that word. I think that we have to try to do something to create this idea of persuadability before we can have meaningful conversations. Right now, you just got one person who's really entrenched in their view, talking to other people who are very entrenched in their view.
sure.
It's great that they're talking, but I don't think that they're engaging in healthy dialogue that is designed to find creative solutions based on compromise and common sense.
Yeah.
John, maybe we should pray. Maybe that's the solution. That's always a good one.
Rely on that heavily. I had a few years ago the opportunity by invitation. I don't know how it came about coming to me, but it did, where I could sit at the table with Governor Whitmer and a variety of religious leaders in the faith community. So we had Muslims and Jews, fundamentalists, Catholics, Sikhs. We had a variety, and it was interesting. Even that's been probably I don't know how many years ago, but even then, ICE came up in the conversation, and one pastor in I think Kalamazoo had created a safe haven in his church for people. But our conversation wasn't about criminals; it was about mothers and children, and this seemed like insensitive treatment towards families was what was seemed to be the topic. And all of us there took a stance of great compassion for these people. We're here for hurting people, is the way we looked at it. We were all there to help people in whatever way we could. And there is, when we're dealing with somebody who is um, a criminal, there's a different course, there's different consequences. And I think one of the things that came out was that there was this uniformity of consequences regardless of the individual status or behavior, and that it was just blanketed. And so, yeah, when somebody who really needs some compassion doesn't get it, the faith community was sensitive to that. If there's someone else that has made some really bad choices, done some really bad things, then the feeling towards that person was uh, far different. But this treating them all the same really was a troubling point. And I think when we look at this, I, I think back, I was reading about the congressional activity before the Civil War. It took them almost a year just to decide on a Speaker of the House. Even within the Democratic convention, there was such disarray over the slavery issue that they could never create a platform, at least a uniform platform. And and it was just crumbling. And then I lived through the Vietnam War years, and boy, talk about polarization. You know, you had the America Love It or Leave It group, and then you had the free love hippie group. You had all this stuff going on, and some wild things happening in the realm of faith. It's like, come on, we're experienced at this. We know that we have to move towards resolution. And to do that, we have to communicate, we have to listen. It's like I've shared before, I even built it into the book that I'm writing, is that if relationship is really important and the issue is really important, I'm going to move towards resolution. If the relationship isn't important, but the issue is, I'll go for a win. I need to win. If it's low relationship, low issue, I'm either going to walk away or yield. I'm going to just say, fine, do whatever you want to. But see, we're working on that lower, I call it lower quadrant of the X and Y axis, that I'm down on the relationship. I don't really care how you feel, but I'm going to go for a win. And so what happens? Nobody wins. Nothing happens. At best, you may get a stalemate.
Yeah.
Meantime, injustice and these things continue to happen. Sadly, deaths happening as a result of that. Where if someone could be persuaded, it could be influential, and I like that point. Leadership is influence, boiled down, that they would bring together those who have the positional authority, and they may not even have the character-based authority you hope for, but at least they have the positional authority, and you move them in this resolution of the issue, maintaining the relationship. That's somebody I would vote for. That's somebody I would follow who could facilitate that. I don't see anybody.
Yeah.
I see lack of character. There's no one that's moving in that direction. They're just digging their heels in, and this is the way it is. I'm not.
Yeah, I see a few people, but it's a very small group of people that I've seen that are taking that high road and have a lot of integrity. But I think it's very hard for anybody in politics to do that because if they want the support of their party, they have to kind of toe the line. But we only have a few minutes left here.
Can I just say one thing, Bill? Let me just say
sure.
one last thing, because I thought, John, first of all, I would nominate you to be a facilitator of any meeting about anything. So it doesn't surprise me you got an invitation to that meeting. But I think that you hit the nail on the head. Mutual purpose was found quickly, right? Families, right? Mothers, children, fathers, children. I think that the mutual purpose here is I think that there would be a consensus around, again, the worst of the worst. You hear that being said, right? The worst criminals, right? I think that there's a lot of common sense around the fact that, of course, we ought to be able to work together to take these horrible offenders who have multiple convictions of serious crimes and agree that they ought to be turned over to the appropriate authorities and be dealt with as convicted criminals. So let's start there, right? But unfortunately, we can't let go of the whole basket of things that we hate about each other. But I think if we can just focus on a singular purpose like that and see if we can work together, then we'll do what you both have said is necessary. We will start to gain mutual trust and respect for people that we've vilified so far because we've been able to focus our energies on something that we agree on and that the vast majority of Americans would agree on. Let's just stop putting all the other baggage onto it. This is what politicians do. In order to get their thing passed, they got to throw 100 things in there that the other side doesn't want, but would be willing to compromise. That's force. Again, we're not changing anyone's mind. We're leveraging political power. We need to do what you and those other religious leaders did with Governor Whitmer and just see if we can find common ground so that we can have a conversation that is meaningful, practical, creative towards a solution. I'm sorry to cut you off, Bill, but to me, that is the answer to your question. What can we do? That's what can be done.
And I wanted to do one more answer to what can we do. What if you are engaging in a conversation, let's call it, with someone, and there's a strong disagreement, and you feel that emotional need to express your opinion, to be right, to make them wrong, whatever. What do you do if you truly want to have influence and to make it a conversation. What do you have to do in yourself? What would you advise to people?
Again, I start with my heart and I ask the question, please help me understand, right? Whereas most people say, shut up so I can help you understand my point of view. So I have to let go of the need to be right. I have to suspend my attachment to my opinion and ask the other people to share the facts on which their opinions are based. Because we will always disagree if all we are two opposing points of view. We have to try to find a common set of facts that we can both agree on. And even if we draw different conclusions from those facts, if we do it within the context of a mutual goal, we're more likely to make progress.
And so to do that, I'll have to start by listening and
Yeah.
not just promoting my own point of view. Anything else you want to add, John, before we close?
Just very quickly, I think people don't realize how much they're being manipulated by
Yeah.
the press, by the politicians to feel the way they're feeling. And the real danger is, if you look historically across different empires, societies, they crumbled from within, not from without. And all our enemies, if we can say that, need to do is just provoke because we will dismantle ourselves. They don't have to work very hard at it. So I think our enemies are watching this going, the time's coming. We'll be able to move in on it to whatever degree. But I feel that we have become weak as a people. Values are not even understood. They're certainly not shared very much anymore. And so I can be, they can set the hook and reel me in whatever direction they want me to go if I don't have feet planted in something solid. And I see people just move with waves. They're just shifting all the time. So
Yeah.
I would admonish people to pause, understand yourself, know yourself, why you feel the way you feel. And then, as Mike says, go out. And as I interact with people, I don't have to reestablish the way I feel. I need to understand how they feel, what is causing it, what's generating it. That can create a unity that is not easily broken. But right now, we don't have any unity because we don't share. As one time, the values and the priorities were shared, they're not that way anymore, uh, sadly.
All right.
And
It's
that's
a
it.
powerful point. That's a great point.
So know thyself,
Know
be
that.
thyself, and then if you are solid and strong in knowing yourself, you don't have to convince anybody else of anything because you already know who you are. Find out who they are.
Amen.
All right, great stuff. Thanks, guys. So we are the authors of The Practice of Letting Go. Our website is thepracticeoflettinggo.com, where you'll find our book, also entitled The Practice of Letting Go, as I said. And we have some other information on that website too. So come and visit us, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.